All right, today I wanted to go over some more modeling stuff for your product. Last week, I went over just some basic things of how to model like the little can and then the obviously gel spray stuff. But I wanted you to see there's different ways that we can model stuff. The two ways that I showed those was starting off with a basic shape like a cylinder and then adding divisions and then tweaking the shape of it. And then the second one was starting off with a cube, adding divisions, and then extruding some pieces, beveling it, and then eventually smoothing it out at the end. So this way I want to show how we can create more intricate shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my middle click, and then I can go to my right view or front view. And what I want to do is draw the profile of my object. So if I go in here to this grid, and I go to my create, and I go to spline, these allow you to create curves just like you would like in Illustrator. And then what I can do is I can use, there's a pen tool, a sketch tool, and a spline arc tool, just so you can see the difference in these. So the pen tool is going to behave very much like the Illustrator vector tool. We get handlebars. We can move those around. We can tweak them. We can hold control to remove them. Oops. There we go. We can hold shift to break the handlebars. Okay. There's the sketch tool, which allows you just to simply draw a shape. Obviously, that's not going to be very accurate unless you have a tablet or something where you can get more of a refined shape there. You also don't have control over how many points you have with that, so you may end up with way too many points. The idea with the starting off with a basic shape was always keeping the points as few as possible and then adding as we go. That process still is intact. Okay, every time you model, as few points as possible and then build up to more points. And then the spline arc tool, which I've never really used, does that. Lets you create splines like that. I don't really have a use for that, but someone might at some point in their life need it. Okay. So let me delete these other points here. Come on, delete, backspace. Alright, I'm going to go to my pen tool, delete that, there we go. Okay, so what I want to do is create the profile of an item. So just so you can see, if I'm trying to create a bottle like this, what I want to do is along the edges of it, that's what I want to outline. Okay, so like I'm going to draw this in Illustrator, draw this in Photoshop, I want to use that pen tool to create an outline of that shape. So if I start here, right there is fine. I'm going to start at the very bottom. Now, I want to make sure that my first point that I click is right aligned with that yellow or that green mark, that grid. So I'm going to go over here to my grid snapping, and I'm going to say enable snap. If you're not aware of this, any of these things with a bar on top, you can click and it'll pull it off. And what's nice about that, when it works, there it goes, is I don't have to keep going back to this. So this is one of those tools where typically 2 to 3 times I have to go back to that menu to adjust stuff. So I'll say enable snap, and then I want to do work plane snap and grid point snap. That way it snaps 2 grid points. Alright, so I'm going to click here first. I'm going to scoot over a bit, click there. I'm going to scoot up a bit, click here, scoot up a bit, and click there. And then I will hit E to get back to my move tool, and then there's my spline. Okay, so that creates a profile. Okay, just one side of the object, just the outline of it. Very simple is that one, right? It's just squarey. If I go back to that pen tool, I can adjust these points. Wrong program. Oops. Why aren't you stretching out? Disconnect. Soft tangents. There we go. Right click, soft tangents. Now I can click on it. Now I can get the handlebars. Now I can tweak it. Okay. So if I don't make them soft initially or have handlebars initially, I can right click and do that. Obviously, the preferred method is to click and then click and drag so you get the handlebars. So you don't have to do that. So I'm going to just draw a shape here just so you can see what's going to happen. Oops. Like that. Like that. And then I'm going to end with the with this right on that center green line too. Okay. So what I want to do is create basically a bowl shape in this case, and it's going to do a revolve. So it's actually going to take that profile and spin it around to create that shape. So I middle click to get back here. Somewhere in here, there it is, super tiny. Go back to my object mode, go back to my spline, go back to my scale, make this bigger. I'll probably actually go to axis center and say center there. Points. Where'd you go? Oh, it's there. Okay. It's just so tiny. Bigger, bigger, bigger. There we go. Okay, so now it's actually a decent size. I can see stuff. Let me jump back to my front view here. As I was scaling it, I moved it away from the center, so I need to move it back. There we go. Okay, close that. All right, so there is my curve. Now what I want to do with this is I want to do a revolve on it. So I'm going to go over here to, not that one, this one, to lathe. Every program calls it something different. And I'm going to take the spline and put it under the lathe. And what you're going to see is that it takes that shape, that curve that I just drew, and it lathes it or revolves it around. And what's cool about that is that we're dealing with strictly just the points that are on that spline. So we can move those out, move those in. I can go to the point mode. I can click on the points, and I can still tweak the points afterwards. So if I want to adjust that shape, whoa, that's crazy. I will switch to the side view so it doesn't freak out. There we go. I can still adjust what that shape is looking like. If I want to get rid of it, I can click the check mark off of the lathe, and I can go and see just the spline and then see the lathe. Okay, so that's what that allows me to do. Now, depending on the kind of object you're doing, you may draw the inside of your shape and the outside, or you may just draw the outside of it. Okay, so if this was a cream bottle or a cream canister, I'm only going to see the outside of it. There's no reason for me to also draw the inside of it. Okay, but if this is a glass cream jar and I am going to see both the inside and outside because it's glass and it has a thickness, I need to draw that thickness in there. Okay, so just stuff to keep in mind as you're working. Let me delete that. All right, so now that we have just the basic concepts of what we're doing, let me zoom out. There it is. Here's my green, here's my blue, so now I have an actual scale. Go to my pen. Again, my first point is always on the green line because I want to make sure that as it revolves, it spins around that thing. If my item is shifted off the green line, it still spins around the green line. So what happens is we have a hole in the center like we just saw a second ago, or it's like overlapping. Okay, so just, I guess so you can see it, I'll do it in the wrong spot. So there, 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 and there. Perfect. All right, so then we'll go back to our lathe. I'll drop this into lathe. Okay, and then you can see how the bottom is like all jacked up. Like, look at that. Okay, because my curve is not on that center line, it didn't start on that center green line, it still spins it around. So what happens is it's supposed to be like on the line, but it's past it. It spins it like this, and so you actually get like part of the surface is like on top of the other surface. So as I move the lathe, oops, grab the object. As I move the lathe object out, you'll see eventually it doesn't do that, and eventually it's like that. Okay, so that's why you want to draw it right on that green line, so that as it spins it around, as it revolves it, it lines up perfectly, so it doesn't look like there's a big opening at the bottom. All right, and you have to draw this in your front view or your side view or your top view, because that way the line stays straight. If I'm in perspective, it doesn't. It's like some weird funky angle. So I'm going to start here, and let's say that I'm doing a cream jar, right? So I'm going to go to that. Oops. Control makes it go straight. Sorry, Alt makes it go straight. Oh. just did it a second ago. Not that. Let's try that again. This. Oh, I was just not zoomed in enough. Then I'm going to come up here like this. Then I'm going to go over a little bit. I'm going to come down a little bit. And then what I'm going to try to do here is keep a consistent thickness. I can go back and adjust it, but I want to try to get it as consistent as I can. This is not going to be easy here where this is like swooping down so far, so that's fine. I'll just click and drag. I'll come straight over, and I'll just click. Okay. Then I can go to my Move tool and click on points and adjust where they're positioned. I can turn snapping off at this point because I don't need snapping for these middle points, just those end ones. Okay, I'm going to move this one down so it's in line with that one. I'm going to move this one down. I can click on his handlebar. Now I'm trying to keep this nice and smooth so that it transitions nicely from one point to the next. Alright, so that looks pretty good there. Cool. Alright, so let me drop the lathe on there. Now remember, I can hold the Alt key when I click on this. As long as the spline is clicked, I can hold Alt and it'll automatically drop the spline into the lathe. So there we go. So now I've created this bowl very quickly. Just see how many divisions I have. I go to Display, Shading Lines, just like before. You want to have, again, as few divisions as possible because we may want to adjust stuff. I may want to add some sort of line around it or something. So under my attributes for the lathe, you'll see how we have the subdivisions here that we could take down. Now, obviously, for a bowl, you probably don't want to take it down that far. Something around 6, maybe that's too little. Something around 8 for this one would probably be good. Yeah, that looks good. And then isoparms is going the other way, so that's going this way. So the subdivisions go around in a circle. These isoparms go around the other direction. So as I go this way, is it updating? Maybe not. Nope. Never mind. Nope, that must be something else then. Never mind. Ignore that. We have caps too, so we can adjust the caps here. We can say that there's no caps. In this case, it's not really going to help us to have caps or not because both sides are meeting at the same exact spot. So it goes around in a complete circle and stops there. When we go to the object here and we change the angle, this is where the caps would come in. So when I change that angle, it opens it up. So now I have an opening here and an opening there. And then I could go to my caps and say cap that and cap that. Come on. Update. Oh, it doesn't want to update. Alright, it should be filling that in. It's not filling it in, it's just being stupid. 180. Nope. Oh, it's just not playing nice today. That's what it should be doing, so just ignore that. For this one, I'm going to keep it at 360. Okay. So there's our shape. Alright, so now I can hit C, and now it makes it a shape. So now it's locked in. I have this as an actual object, just like I would have modeled it from a cube or a sphere or whatever, or a cylinder. If I want to get rid of some of these divisions, because like in here there's a lot of divisions, I would go to my edges, I would double click, shift double click, shift double click, and then I could right click and say melt, dissolve, there we go, and now they go away. And the whole purpose of that is just to minimize the amount of points you have on there. And then what I would do eventually is I would eventually drop this into a subdiv surface so that it becomes nice and smooth again. If But I typically don't want to do that until I'm satisfied with the shape that I've already created here. So with this, let's say that I wanted some extra lines. So I go to my knife tool, I go to edges, make sure I'm on the lathe itself. I can add some extra divisions in here. Then I can go to my faces. I can pull this selection menu off also. And I can do my loop selection there and there. I can go to extrude and just push that in. That's cool. Then I can go back to my edges, grab my edges. Bless you. And then throw a little bevel on those. That should be good. Alright, so now when I turn my subdivision back on, now I have these nice divisions inside the bowl. Now I did that just on the outside of the bowl, not the inside. So this is what's nice about how we've done this, is that we have these two sides that we can adjust separately. Cool. Alright, so now let's pretend for a second. Close all these windows. That I wanted to put something inside of this bowl. If I duplicate this by just holding Control and just scooting it over, okay, notice how it duplicated the subdivision surface and the lathe. I'm going to turn off the subdivision surface for a second, and I'm just going to look at the lathe. And I'm going to delete all the faces on the outside. So I'm going to go to that select loop tool, and let's say that whatever I'm putting in here, it's going to come up to about there. Okay, so I'm going to delete that. And delete that. Okay. Now once I've deleted that piece, what should happen, and we'll see if this is working today, I should be able to double click the faces out here, and it should grab everything else because they're no longer attached to the other one. So if I switch to my move tool and double click this face, yes. Okay, so you see how I grabbed everything on the outside because I broke where they were connected. Okay, so those faces here and here that go around, I deleted where they're connected, so now they're two separate faces or two separate groups. So now I can just double click one and I can delete it, and now I'm left with just the inside area. Okay, so now this is basically just the inside of the bowl. So now if I take this and I go through the edges here, I go to my M key. Notice how there is, if I hit D, there's a close hole polygon tool. So I hit D, and then I click, and now it closes that surface off. Cool. So now I can go to faces. Now I can click on this face. Oops, I don't want the face actually, I want the edge. There we go. It's not going to let me select the edge all the way around. I could grab the face, I guess. Either one works. I basically want to put a bevel on this. A nice little bevel like that. Okay, so now I have a bevel. When I turn my subdivision on, you'll see how we get this nice shape that fits perfectly inside of here. And that's probably the biggest amount of hand cream you'll get in a jar. They fit it right to the top. That's awesome. Cool. So now let's say that I want to take this, and in my vision of what this is eventually going to look like, the jar is just going to be a glass jar that allows us to see through it. The top of it will have a cap on it, and the cap will have a label on top of the cap. Okay. So I'm going to just make a really quick cap. I'm going to start off with a cylinder. I could use the same tool that I used before. I actually prefer to use everything off of a basic shape and then go there. Let's say that. Alright, that looks good. I'm going to hit C. I'm going to grab, oops, I'm not going to hit C yet, sorry. I'm going to go to my object, take my divisions down to about 8 so they match the other shape underneath it. Then hit C. Then go to this edge, oops, sorry. go to all the vertices. Now remember from last time when we talked about this is that on a cylinder, these pieces are not actually connected, right? So every time I make a cylinder, I have to make sure I grab all the points and do the optimize. That way they're welded together. That way they're not separate. That way I can do bevels on it and extrudes and whatever else. All right, so now I can do a little bevel here just to round the top off. I'm going to grab the faces for the top here. I could use that loop tool, but it's not actually terribly in need of that. I'm going to extrude this inner so it brings it in towards the center. Then I'm going to extrude it down, so I hit D, and I'm going to push it down. And that just creates a little lip on there so that I have a spot for my label. And then I can go in with my edges here and just start adding some more bevels where I need them. There we go. All right, so that should be good. So I've created, if I just look at that one surface there, I'm going to go to Solo, Viewport Solo Selection. Oops, sorry, no, wrong one. There we go. Yep, and I probably want to take this in too, just so that's like up a little bit higher. So I'll do the same thing, extrude inner, not as much though, and then a regular extrude to push it up. Okay, so now I have actually a cap there. Depending on how fancy I want to get with this, I can go even further. I can actually put threads in there if I wanted to put threads in there. Okay, so if this was going to be like a glass thing where you would see the threads, I could put them. I'm going to show you it just so you know how to do it. Under the Create Object, you would go to Helix. Sorry, nope. Under Create Spline, you would go to Helix. I would turn this viewport back off. Now this creates this like spirally type thing that I could then rotate, or instead of rotating it, whenever you create an object in Cinema, on the side there, see where it says plane XY? Sometimes it says plane, sometimes it says axis, sometimes it says something else. You can change that, and that will change how it's creating the object. So instead of you rotating it, it's just a quicker way to get it, okay? And if you know that every time I create this, it's going to be XZ, then you just know that XZ is going to be that. All right. So all the controls for this are right here. So here's the start radius, the end radius, the start angle, end angle, radius bias, or radial bias, height bias, and then subdivisions. What I care about here is getting this to fit where that cap is going to be. So obviously the height of this is shorter than that one, so I need to take the height down. So I just click and drag to bring that down. Let me scoot this up. Let me scoot this over so we can see it right on top of it. Right there. Let me grab both of these objects. There we go. That way I can see just that helix there. Okay. So with this cylinder here, I'm going to Alt and then click on the subdivision so I can see how smooth it is going to be. And then this is my helix, so I'm going to play with the angles of this so that it comes out to about there. That looks good. And then this one comes out to about the same. Good. So that should be about right at the edge of that. So if I were to move this here, oh, it's so close, just a little bit less. All right, so maybe like 260. That's pretty close. Make sure this is lined up right. It was just off a bit. I can turn on my grid snapping and snap it right to that line so it makes more sense. There we go. Okay, so that is almost there still, maybe 270 now. And all I'm trying to do is line it up so that it's in line with where that shape is. Okay. It looks like I'm a little bit soft right there. Let me go into my edges. Yep, I don't have a bevel on this cylinder here. So it's actually like rounding it off too much just so you can see it. It's like softening that. So I need to take both of those, little bevel on it, better. And so now when it does that, we have a nice crisper edge. Okay. So now this helix is basically riding along the side of that, right where it should be. Now to get the helix to actually create a surface, I can do a couple things. One of them is I could use an extrude. This probably is, or this isn't going to do what I want it to do, but just so you can see what an extrude does, we drop it in there. If we go to look at the extrude itself, it does that. So what it's doing is it takes that actual circle, that spline, and it just pulls a surface off of it. Okay, so it's very similar to the lathe that takes our spline and spins it around, but this one just takes it and extends it. Okay, so this one could work. I mean, I could make it work, but the kind of surface it gives me is pretty inconsistent. If you look at this size here and you look at that size there, you can see there's definitely a thinness and a thickness. So this won't work, but I just want you to see it. Okay, so delete, oops, not that, delete the extrude. The one that's going to be the one that works is going to be this sweep. And the sweep, if you look at the picture of it, there's two curves. One is here, and then the other one is along it, okay? So basically we create a profile and then we create a path. And it takes that profile and it moves it along the path, and that's how it creates that surface. So I'm going to go to create spline, and I'm going to create an end side. And I can make this 4 sides. I can make it 3 sides is what I actually want, like that. Okay, so that will be the shape that gets spun around my object. I'm going to make it tinier so I can click on it and just scale it down to something appropriate, like that. Okay, then I'm going to go to my sweep, and I'm going to drop the sweep in, or the end side in, and I'm going to drop the helix in. Now once I do this, I get something, okay? Now what's happening here is it doesn't know right now, well, it knows what it's doing, but I haven't told it which order I want these things to spin in. It doesn't know which one is the profile or which one is the path. So what it does is whatever's on top is the one that gets moved around. So I need to swap the order here, so I just move this like that, and now it's going the correct direction, okay? So I just make sure my end side is on top and my helix is on the bottom, and now we have that. Now if we look at this, the triangle shape is actually facing the wrong direction, okay? So I want the pointy part to point towards the inside of the cap, not the outside of it, not the edge, just so you can kind of see that as I move the helix down. Whoops. Okay, it's like inside there. That doesn't really make sense, right? So I need to go to my end-sided one, and all I have to do is rotate it. Now once I start and I made this a sweep, you'll see that the end side goes away. I can't see it anymore. When I turn this off, I can see it again. So it's not a huge deal either way. Oops. I just need to know that I can spin that around. And I can turn that back on. All right, let me go to the sweep. There might be an option on here that's keeping it from doing that. Rotation. No, don't want that. Banking. Why aren't you playing nicely? I guess I could do that, right? That works. There. I'll just do this on the end rotation. No, I can't do the end rotation. Why won't you work? It's not playing nice today. Use rail scale, stick UV, subnormals, use rail direction. Parallel movement, don't want that. Let me go to my helix here and spin this around and see if that does anything. And it could just be, again, that it's just not playing the way I want it to play today. Let me pull these out. Let me drop them back in. He's facing some weird wonky way. That's fine. Oh, I think I know what I did wrong. It's always something. I'm going to rotate it like that. So it's facing the other direction. With that selected, this object still has this rotation in there. The sweep, I believe, is getting rid of that. So it's like basically eliminating that 180 and just resetting it back to 0. So what I need to do is go to freeze and say freeze all. Oops, freeze all. There you go. So now this is at 0. So now when I drop it in, nope, just being stupid now. Unsided, yes. Sweep. Nothing new with the caps. Those can be fine like that. And scale, no. And rotation, no. Why would it do that? It's facing that way. That one's facing this way. Linear, adaptive, cubic. I'm going to flip this way. Maybe the helix needs to be locked in. No, that's not it either. Alright, it might just be my computer just acting up, but one of those should have flipped it around to the other way. Okay, but that's how we would want to do something like that, so that we have that kind of threading on the inside. And then what I would do is take that same threading and I could duplicate it and bring it down to the other side. So if I unsolo this, oops, there we go. Just so we can see where everything is. This is my cap, this is my threading, should be threading. I can duplicate that and pull it down here. And then scale this up. Oops, a bit more. Go. I'm going to grab the helix and just scale it down slightly. My snap is still on, that's why it's freaking out. There we go. And then my end-sided one, I think I'll just shrink that down to, might be too big. Just for fun, can I take this? Still doesn't want to play nice. Alright, so that would be my cap, that would be the helix part. Okay, so that's another way that you could kind of model stuff in there. Now, as you get more complex with your surfaces, you want to start organizing them a bit better. All of those are that one surface. So I have my cream that's inside it, I have the jar on the outside, I have the lid, and then I have the two threadings. So I would want to group them for sure so that they're all part of the same item. But I also want to look at this and start giving them names, right? So base threads, lid threads, lid top. It doesn't matter, but it's going to bother me. But there we go. Cream. Lid, I don't know why I put lid top. Lid top is the same thing. Lid. There we go. Okay. So now all that's organized nicely. Jar. Now, the way that it's set up currently is everything is kind of like in a weird spot. That's fine. Leave everything in a weird spot. Eventually what we would do is stage this so that it looks a little bit more presentable. So one thing we'd want to do is take the lid threads and the lid. I'd probably group those together and just put lid group. And then eventually I would just kind of put this in a spot where it just looks more appealing. So if this is a product that I'm kind of showing off, I may have it just like laying on the side of it like this. right? So if I'm doing an ad and I want to show the cream inside, I want to show the lid so I can see the label, I would do that. But I don't do that now. I do that after, because in order for me to do the texture, I need to make sure that some stuff is laid out correctly first. So don't move anything, stage anything yet. Just keep it straight up and down, positioned like this. Okay? Cool. Now, another thing we could do is if I go to the cream and I duplicate this out, I may want to give the cream some shape. If you look at any of the pictures of hand lotions or anything online, they have a shape besides what we're seeing here. If I hit my Shift R button, it doesn't look like cream at all. So I may want to adjust that so that it looks like it. Now the way I would do that is I would take the cream itself, duplicate it first obviously so we have a copy, and then I would hit C, and now I have the divisions of one of them turned up. Okay, now here if I go to these edges, like this, there we go, and I'm selecting these edges, I can start to move some of this up here or start to move some of this up here. Now this still isn't going to look very nice, especially when I start grabbing stuff on the other side. Options, only visible. This is the only time I use only visible, when I'm doing this, because of that. There we go. This still isn't going to look nice. So what I may want to do is actually subdivide this again to get enough divisions where I can create some nice little like ripples or waves in it. So I would subdivide that again. That's a lot of divisions. And then I would go through my subdivisions again, hit C. Again, lots of divisions, but now I can go through and start to give it some more shape. Okay. Now I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't grab stuff like this and move it up, because you still get this like ugliness there. What I would do is I would go to the points. I have some points sticking out on the side here, so I'm going to just select those real quick and then do that optimize, and that should clean those up. Yep, there we go. Okay. I'm going to go to the sculpt tool, and I'm going to go to this to pull that off. Now what this allows you to do is take your surface and actually sculpt it like it was a piece of clay. So if I wanted to push and pull and tweak and give it kind of like a ripply shape, that's what I could do with this. So I'm going to go to pull, and I want to see if I can turn off my wireframe now. I don't want to see that. Link size, pressure, preview mode on surface. Size. Yes, 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 yes. That's all right. Okay. All right, let me grab that again. Subdivision surface, yes. Pull. Hold down R, and then you can left click and drag to make this bigger. And then for my settings here, I'm going to take the pressure up. I really don't want it to be that. And why aren't you moving? Oh, it was moving. There we go. Yep, so you do have to be in points for that. That's just stupid. Let me deselect my points so that I can actually see something. There it is. Now I go to pull. Preview on surface. Something is clicked. Yes, yes, yes. All off, stamp size. Yeah, everything's right. There it goes. It just wasn't updating. I don't know what the deal was. There you go. It's actually only doing it from the bottom. All right, something's going on here. Yeah, I could just flip it. That's weird, though, of why it would do that. Keep briefing on mode. Purpose, yes. It's not. Okay, so for whatever reason, backface, excuse me, backface wanted to be clicked. It shouldn't. So my surface. Okay, now I'm thinking of it. Because of how I created this, it was actually the inside of the can. No, that should have still worked. It's just being stupid. All right. So I'm going to hit undo so I can undo all of that mess. Which is, again, why it's important to keep copies of things so that we don't screw up the original. Let me go underneath so I can see when it stops being stupid. I told you it was acting weird today, right? Perfect. Okay. All right. So now backface is clicked. I'm on pull, and now I should be able to push this stuff down here. Okay, I don't have to be in points. I was right. I can hit R to scale this down. I can go to settings and change the pressure. You can also change the size here too, so if you forget the hotkey. Okay, you can also use a tablet for this if you want to use a tablet. But you can see how I'm just creating these like nice little ripples in here so that my cream actually looks like it has a little bit more design to it than just a block, right? So obviously, looking at, there's my old cream, there's a new one. This one looks a lot creamier than that one does. And you can use things like grab, and I can grab the center of this and actually like pull it up a little bit and give it like the little peak that it would have. This thing here, this little weird icon in the middle, this is the drop off. So in the center, it's going to be the most pressure, and then it's going to gradually drop off and then hit this area on the side where it's just like half pressure. So if I go to the fall off here, that's what this is. I can change that too. So if I go like this, I should get the most pressure at the very center, and then very quickly it's going to drop off. Okay, so what we should get is more of a point instead of like a big glob that comes up. Ma'am.
Earlier, like before it was like actually playing around and stuff, you had all the points selected. Are they still selected and you're just not showing it?
No. I don't have to have the points selected. Okay. I shouldn't have had to have the points selected. It just wasn't updating, so I kept selecting them.
Okay.
All right. So now with this one, you can see how pointy this is compared to what we just saw a second ago, which was a bit softer of a look. And again, that icon updated, so you can see now that icon is more like this, so it's going to be very pointy as far as how I pull it. Okay? So that will play a role in how you do this stuff too. If you hold down Shift, that will smooth out your painting. So if I pull something like this and I'm like, oh my god, that looks horrible, I can hold Shift and then go back on it, and it'll soften it out. It'll just basically like smooth out those points. Now again, save copies of this just so you have it in case you need it. You can also just go to smooth if you forget, again, that hotkey. There's some other ones. There's wax, so it'll give you this kind of like, if you were to do lipstick and you wanted that like crisp edge on there, you could do something like that, and that would create a nice crisp edge. There's a knife tool which allows you to like cut lines in it. So if you wanted more of like a wavy pattern, you could do that. Again, a tablet comes in handy so that you don't make it look ugly like I just did. And then softening it out after you do that definitely helps too. Pinching, oops, make that bigger. It just pinches the points together so you can get a little bit crisper area. It's kind of like knife. Knife basically creates these little peaks. Pinch does it, but it just takes the stuff around it and just pushes it closer together is what it's doing. Here's flatten. So that'll just flatten out an area. Oops. If you get too close to the edge, it just freaks out. There we go. Here's inflate. I mean, obviously you can play with any of these. You'll see on inflate, okay, this is going like inward. If I hold down control, there it goes, it'll go the opposite way. So inflate, the opposite of it is deflate. In this case, it's like backwards. You hold control, and that's the opposite of whatever tool you're on. So just so you can see, if I pull, it's pushing it in. If I hold control, it'll actually pull it out. Okay? Just because for whatever reason this surface, Cinema's seeing it as a backward surface. There we go. Okay. I don't know what fill does. Never played with that one. Whenever you scrape either, what does that do? Yeah, typically you just use the top ones, the ones I went through, but it's always nice to see what else they have. Alright, so I could add just a very quick kind of like little design to this. The bigger my brush, the bigger the design. The smaller my brush, the smaller the design. I need to have divisions in order for this to work. If I go back to this one here, and I copy it over, and I'll hit C so we can see this in action. Oops. I go back to my pull. Oh, pull that out. There we go. No, why are you? And now it showed me the wireframe again. What are you doing? That's that one. That's that. You're all by yourself. Yes. Yes. Pressure, settings, preview on surface, display. It's so weird. Whatever. So with this one, you can see that I'm not going to get very much detail in here, even if I shrink this brush down super tiny. Because there's no points right there, it's not going to move the surface at all. That's why I subdivided it, and then I subdivided it again, so that I would get enough divisions that I could go in here and add a whole bunch of detail to this. Okay? Because it only moves where there's points. So the more detail you want, the more points you need. Especially like right here, there's a lot of points. So we can really go into this area and start to tweak it. Even with a small brush. Where on the other one, we couldn't do that. Okay? So I obviously want to undo that so I don't have that cream. Something like that. Just for fun, if I go back to that. Yeah, see that wireframe is still on. It shouldn't be on. Visual size, yes. Draw mode, direction, yes, yes. Well, whatever. Probably reboot will fix that. Okay. So, just some more stuff to keep in mind as you're modeling your stuff, as you're going through it. Adding in those details really does help having it look right. So having the threads here, if I'm going to show that, makes sense. If this cap is just on here and I don't see the threads, there's no reason to have it. If the jar is closed, it's a white jar, we don't see inside it, there's no reason to have the cream inside there. But if it's going to be glass, we need to have that in there. If it's glass, we also need thickness. Now, just so you can see the difference here too, if I go to, I'm just going to create a simple scene. Oops. Oh, they did. So if I just make a simple plane like this and like this, and then I grab this edge back here. Oops, too many divisions. Let me shrink those divisions down to 1 and 1. There we go. I'm going to extrude this up. And then I'm going to take this edge and just add a bevel to it. Alright, so now we just have this backdrop for our products. Okay, this will eventually be what we do, but for right now, don't worry about it. I'm going to add a light into my scene. Again, I could grab the light and change the axis. Somewhere in there it is. I'll just rotate it. There we go. All right. So I'm going to take this product here and just drop a material on it. And I will make this a glass material. So I'm going to go to transparency. I'm going to choose a custom one. So this is going to be glass. There it is. And now when I render this, you can see the thickness of the glass here, and you can see how it's kind of like distorting the image underneath, or the items underneath. If we don't have that, if it's just a solid shape, like this cube, and I put that same exact material on here, this cube isn't going to look like a cube of glass, it's just going to look like a really strange looking cube, because it doesn't have the physical dimensions it would have. The second I add a bevel to this, it'll look like a solid piece of glass, like an actual cube of glass. And if I gave it a thickness, like I deleted stuff and I gave it a thickness on the inside, then it'll look like a container of glass. I don't know what's caught my throat today. Let's go to our object. Let's go to fillet. Let's go to 20. That might be a little bit too much. Let's go to 10. That's good. Okay, so now this is looking more like a cube of glass, like if we actually had just a solid cube of glass. If I go to this and I hit C, so I have an actual object, I go to faces, I extrude this inward, like that. I add a little bevel on the bottom here. Cool. Change my angle. All right, so now we're getting this to look like an actual container of glass, right? So the details will play off eventually. When we get to the texturing part and the lighting part, that's where you're really going to start to see those. In the modeling phase, we just have to be aware of them so that we can start to add those details in here. Things like your bevels, hugely important, right? Even this thing being glass, and then these threads being glass too, if those were supposed to be glass. Gorgeous, right? Good enough for now. If it helps you to kind of just assign materials to things just so you can kind of get an idea of what stuff is doing, feel free to. Some of these, like the transparency, there's these presets. So you can just drop a preset on there and it'll automatically fill it in. I think transparency is the only one that has that. For reflection, you could just turn on the reflection, turn this to Word is typically the one I use. And then you can adjust this. So roughness gone, it's really reflective like a mirror. Roughness up, it's like really diffused. And then how much reflection strength is actually there. Okay, so this is down and that's gone, it's black. But then as the reflection strength comes up, and as that comes up. Okay, these little preview things are so nice because you can see pretty quickly what it's supposed to be doing. As opposed to, you know, back in my day, we didn't have that. Or that wasn't as interactive. Okay, so if that's supposed to be red metallic cream for whatever reason inside there, there's some red metallic cream. Now it's not going to look exactly like that image because that image has stuff that's reflecting into it, right? So if I, just for fun, let's say I got rid of my color and I took my roughness down, took my reflection up, and my specular strength up. Okay, so looking at this picture, we're going to see this looks like a mirror, looks like a piece of chrome. But when I render this, it's not going to look like that because I don't have anything in my scene to reflect into there, right? So in this little picture, they have an environment. That's what's making it look realistic. So I'd have to create that later on, which I'll show when we get to it, of how we can get other stuff to look like it's reflecting in. All right. And then I can tint it with a color if I need to. Okay. Seeing as how that's cream, I would actually probably have very rough surface, very little reflection. Oops, my color would be like a white. Maybe not that strong. Maybe actually like a creamy color. Specular strength. Actually, I think something like that might actually work really good. Needs a little bit more. So a little bit more of that. Don't play with it too much. You just want to get an idea of what it's going to look like without, you know, all the stuff. Okay, it just kind of helps you visualize where you're going to need to add some detail. Cool. All right, so that's just some extra stuff to go